Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight, you're not a dashing industrialist or a Dickensian hero with plucky luck and a mysterious benefactor. You're a chimney sweep in 19th century London, which is to say, you're a child. Small enough to fit where brushes can't, poor enough to be cheaper than metal rods, disposable enough that when you get stuck they'll just brick up the flue behind you. You're not here because you made a poor life choice. You're here because your life wasn't considered worth choosing in the first place. Before we wedge you into a sooty death tunnel and start describing what third-degree burns smell like when mixed with coal dust, do me a small favour. Leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what ungodly hour it is. I like knowing who's tuning in from around the world. And if you'd like early access to more of these bedtime tragedies, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. But for now, lie back, get comfortable, let's begin. You're 5 years old, maybe 6, old enough to stand without falling over, old enough to know what hunger feels like, but not old enough to be asked what you want, or if you understand. Your parents don't ask. The parish doesn't ask. The workhouse matron simply signs the paper, and a man with a sooty coat and cracked hands takes your wrist, not your hand, and leads you away. You don't know where you're going, only that you're going. You are small. That's the important part. Small enough to crawl inside spaces no one else wants to think about. Small enough to fit up chimneys. That's your qualification. That's your resume. You exist at the right ratio of height to desperation. Congratulations. You do not begin your career as a respected apprentice. No one gives you a new set of clothes or a set of tools to carry. You're not trained, you're shoved. A brush can't climb a flue by itself, but a child can. You are now that brush, only softer, more flexible, and significantly more flammable. You're not expected to ask questions, just to climb. If you speak, you're told to shut up. If you hesitate, you're told to climb faster. If you cry, your master will beat the soles of your feet with a rod until you move. You're not a worker, you're a tool. A soft, wet tool with bones that haven't hardened yet and lungs that still believe in air. Your new home is a cellar. It smells of wet ash, old lye soap, and something that might once have been meat. You sleep on straw if you're lucky, or rags if the straw's been sold. You share your space with rats, and you're grateful for their warmth. You learn not to complain. You learn not to ask for food unless it's offered. You learn that offered usually means scraps left behind. Your clothes are second-hand, in the most literal sense, worn by the last boy who lived here, before he grew too big or too dead to be useful. The cuffs are frayed. The knees are crusted with soot and worse. The fabric never stops itching, no matter how much you scratch. The master sweep doesn't learn your name. He calls you lad or boy or occasionally it. You are one of many. Climbing boys, they call you. Some as young as 4, most under 8. Some of them never say a word. Others won't stop talking, not because they're cheerful, but because they're terrified of the silence. You're somewhere in the middle, too scared to speak, too cold to scream. You spend your nights listening to coughing. Not just a little clearing of the throat, but deep, gravelly, hacking coughs that sound like someone trying to vomit up soot. It's the sound of your future, and everyone around you seems to know it. In another world, you might have been a schoolboy. You might have held a pencil instead of a scraper. But that world is for children with parents who can afford to keep them. You are not one of them. You are a climbing boy, and your job is simple. Clean the chimneys, stay small, and try not to die. Preferably in that order. It's early. Too early. The air still tastes of wet stone and coal dust. Your legs ache from walking, but you don't complain. The master stops in front of a tall townhouse with soot-blackened bricks and windows that don't open. He doesn't say much, just jerks his thumb toward the side alley where the servants' entrance waits. You follow him down into a cramped scullery that smells of soap, meat fat and yesterday's fire. The hearth is already cold, but the brick around it still holds heat. The cook gives a curt nod, barely glancing at you. To her, you're no more remarkable than a broom. Your master kneels and removes the iron plate from the base of the chimney. The mouth of the flue yawns open before you, dark, narrow, crusted with black grease. You stare at it for too long. He notices. His voice is flat, almost bored. Up you go. You hesitate. Not because you're trying to be disobedient, but because it doesn't look like something a human being could enter. It looks like a wound in the wall. It smells like old fire, mould, and something bitter, something chemical. You shake your head. He doesn't argue. He simply taps the soles of your feet with the wooden brush handle, hard enough to sting. Now, he says, or we come back later with the stick. You step in. The opening is lower than your shoulders, so you crouch, twisting yourself into the dark, like an animal entering a hole. Your hands scrape the inside. Your knees slide along the brick. Soot clings to you instantly. It fills your fingernails, creeps into your ears, sticks to the wet in your mouth. You inch forward, then up, pressing your back against one side of the flue, your knees against the other. You climb the way insects do, awkward, angular, desperate. The flue is barely wider than your shoulders, and it gets narrower the higher you go. Brick and mortar press in on all sides, rough and uneven, flaking bits of carbon and stone into your eyes. You don't make it very far. The panic hits fast. It starts as a tightness in your chest, then a twitch in your throat. You can't breathe properly. You want to call out, but there's no room for your lungs to expand. You cough and it echoes inside the shaft, like a dying animal. You reach a bend and realise your limbs don't know how to move around it. You try to twist, but the space won't allow it. Your knee gets stuck. You jerk it free, scraping off a layer of skin in the process. Then your elbow jams, then your ribs. You stop, you go still, and then you cry. You don't mean to, you know better. Crying makes it worse, but you're not thinking anymore. You're just making noise, hiccuping breath into air that's thick with powdered coal. The sound travels downward. A moment later, you feel the blow. A sharp rap to the soles of your feet, muffled but unmistakable. Again, and again. Not hard enough to break anything, just hard enough to communicate. Climb or starve, climb or die. You don't want to climb, you want to get out. You want someone to pull you back and say, it was all a mistake, but no one is coming. So you push. Eventually, the panic dulls. Not because it goes away, but because there's no energy left to fuel it. Your tears mix with soot until your vision turns black. You keep moving, 1 inch at a time. Elbow, knee, elbow, knee. You reach a vertical stretch, then another bend. The soot here is thicker, caked like grease. It comes off in sheets that fall onto your face, into your mouth. You gag. There's nothing to spit out, only soot and spit and fear. You think about stopping again, but now you know what happens when you stop. At some point, though you'll never remember exactly when, you see light, a faint grey beam from the top of the shaft. You don't celebrate. You're too tired for that. You just keep climbing until your fingers find the edge and you drag yourself out onto a cold slate rooftop. You lie there, covered in filth, limbs shaking, lungs wheezing like broken bellows. Your body feels too big, your skin too tight. Your mouth tastes like ash and blood. Your stomach cramps, but there's nothing inside it to bring up. You don't say anything. No one does. There is no praise, no nod, just a wave from the master far below, telling you to come back down. You descend by ladder, and even that hurts. Your knees tremble, your eyes sting. You're not sure if you can walk straight anymore. You land in the alley, and the master hands you a crust of bread. It's stale, almost sharp at the edges, but it's food, so you eat it. He nods toward the next house. No more words, you follow. There are more flues to climb today. This was just the first. Your legs barely move, but they move. You've learned the rule now, and it will stay with you. If you don't climb, you don't eat, or breathe, or last the week. You don't talk much for the rest of the day, not because you're sullen, but because your voice is gone. Stripped raw by soot and silence, your master doesn't ask how you feel. That's not part of the job. The job is simple. Go up, come down, and try not to get stuck. Next time, he says, it'll be easier. That's a lie, of course. But it's the kind of lie people tell when the truth is too cruel to repeat. And so you nod, and you climb again. You go to bed that night, sore, coughing, and silent. You don't dream. Or if you do, you don't remember. By morning, you're no longer the new boy. Just another one of the many who climb. The bell rings before the sky changes colour. Not that you need the bell, you're already awake. The cold has a way of creeping into your joints and shaking you conscious, whether you want it to or not. You sit up on your mat, or maybe just the bit of floor where your mat used to be, and pull your ragged coat over your shoulders. It doesn't help much. The damp has soaked into everything. Your breath comes out in clouds, even indoors. Somewhere in the room, another boy coughs himself upright. Then another. You all move without speaking. There's no ceremony to it. No good mornings, just a shuffling, scraping ritual of limbs stiff from sleep, and lungs packed with soot. Your breakfast is what's left from yesterday's supper, if anything is left at all. A crust of bread, if the master is in a generous mood. Sometimes a boiled potato. Sometimes nothing. Hunger doesn't make you complain. It just makes you faster. The sooner you finish your flues, the sooner you might earn something worth chewing. You gather your bundle, brushes, scrapers, cloth. It weighs more than it should. Not because the tools are heavy, but because you're still too small to be carrying them. Your arms ache before you've even left the cellar. You're told that means you're growing. That's not good. Growing means outgrowing the job. And outgrowing the job means being replaced. You step out into the street barefoot, always barefoot. Boots are for boys who work above ground. You don't. You work in chimneys, so your feet are expected to toughen. At least that's what the master says. In practice, it just means frostbite. The stones are cold and slick, the gutters brimming with runoff and rot. Horse dung, mud, bits of frozen cabbage. You step through it all with practiced indifference. The air is thick with fog, so heavy you could chew it. Somewhere nearby, a coal cart rattles over cobblestones, and someone is already shouting at someone else. The city wakes the same way you do. Slow, grim, and slightly violent. The master walks ahead. You and the other boys follow like tired shadows trailing behind a man who doesn't bother to check if you're still there. The first house is always the worst. Not because of the chimney, though that doesn't help, but because your muscles haven't caught up to your misery yet. The cold hasn't shaken loose, and your hands don't grip properly. You climb, wheezing, still tasting the phlegm that collected overnight. The soot feels heavier in the morning, damper, more clotted. It sticks to your fingers and clogs your nose. You keep your mouth closed, not because it helps, but because it's the only thing you can still control. By the second chimney, your body starts to remember what it's supposed to do. Climb, brace, scrape, descend. You fall into a rhythm, not because the work is easy, but because resistance takes more energy than submission. You move like a ghost through the homes of the wealthy, the middle class, the pious, the indifferent. No one speaks to you directly. Servants open the hearth. You climb, you come back down. They close it again. Occasionally someone hands you a biscuit or a coin or a scowl. None of it matters. The chimney is always the same from the inside. Black, narrow, hot. You forget where you are unless you see the wallpaper on the way in. 6 chimneys in, you stop counting. Your fingers bleed a little. Your knees scrape. One of the boys gets stuck for a moment in a flue that twists too sharply. The master shouts. The brush handle makes contact with the soles of his feet. He coughs. He climbs. You don't ask if he's all right because you already know he's not, and asking won't change anything. You finish your route and move to the next house. Then the next. Some days it's 6 chimneys, some days it's 12. Some days you don't know how many it is because the soot in your brain has settled over your memory like a blanket. You just move. That's the point. Movement means you're still useful. By afternoon, the cold has worn off, replaced by a damp heat that clings to your skin and turns your clothes into a paste. Your coat smells like old sweat and scorched wool. Your hair itches. Your eyes sting. Your back feels like it's been sanded with bricks. And yet, somehow, it's all normal now. You've been taught, without words, that this is how the world works. You suffer, you crawl, you breathe soot and eat crusts and keep your mouth shut. If you grow too big, you'll be cast out. If you grow too slow, you'll be beaten. If you stop altogether, you'll be left behind. By evening, you're stumbling through alleys, the tools dragging behind you. Your limbs twitch on their own. The boys don't talk much. Someone is crying, but it's a dry sound. No tears left, just the noise of sorrow that's gone stale. You return to the cellar. You curl up on the floor. You scratch at your skin, trying to loosen the crust of ash that's hardened in your pores. The master counts his coins. You cough again. You wonder if this is what growing up feels like. But you already know the answer. You're not growing up. You're just growing older. There's a difference. Tomorrow, the bell will ring again, and you'll rise and walk and climb. Not because you're brave, not because you want to, but because there's nothing else to do. The crawl continues, and as long as you're small enough to fit, you will keep going. The city wasn't built for you. That much becomes obvious the longer you live in it. London is a maze, stacked and layered and stretched into impossible shapes by people who never thought about children crawling through its arteries. It's a place of chimneys, yes, but not chimneys designed for human passage. The flues were made for heat, not for flesh, for smoke, not for boys. And yet, here you are, jammed inside a vertical tunnel that kinks like a twisted gut, trying not to panic while your elbows scrape raw against soot-crusted brick. Every building is different, but they all share one trait: contempt. Some flues are barely wide enough for a rat to pass through, and yet you're expected to climb them. Some twist sideways with no warning, forcing your body into contortions you didn't know were possible. Others split in two, and you're left guessing which fork won't get you wedged until your ribs cave in. There's no standard, no logic, no consistency. It's like the city was designed specifically to break you in as many ways as possible, and then keep going. You try to memorize them, the flues, the layouts, the danger bends. You learn quickly which chimneys burn hotter than they should, which ones still smoulder even when extinguished. Some are smooth from centuries of use, slick with glazed soot. Others crumble under your weight, brick by brick, as if they resent your presence. A few are lined with jagged metal, chimney caps that slice skin from fingertips if you move too fast. The worst have bird nests, twigs, bones, feathers, all crammed into tight corners. You've seen a boy cough feathers for 2 days straight after disturbing one. Sometimes a house will have secret bends, design quirks meant to hide smoke from view or muffle the noise of the fire. These are death traps. You enter what looks like a straight shaft, only to find yourself twisted 90 degrees into a space barely large enough for your chest. The soot here is packed thick as tar, and once you're in, you can't turn around. You just have to wriggle forward and pray the flue doesn't narrow further. Some boys get stuck, most make it out, a few don't. When that happens, the master doesn't call the fire brigade, he calls the bricklayer. You don't think about that too often, not because it's rare, but because you can't afford to. Thinking slows you down. It makes you hesitate, and hesitation gets you hurt. So you focus on movement, on process. Elbow, knee, scrape, turn, breathe. The rhythm becomes its own survival mechanism. It pushes back against the panic. It gives you something to do when everything around you feels like it's pressing inward, like the house is trying to swallow you. And in a way it is. London is a mouth, and you are the thing it chews on when no one's watching. A Above ground, the city breathes smoke. Below, it hoards it. Every room, every hearth, every pipe organ of brick and ash is part of a system that was never designed to be clean. The idea of sweeping a chimney is laughable if you think about it too hard. You're not really cleaning. You're reducing build-up enough to delay the next fire hazard. The soot never goes away. It just moves, from the flue to your hands, from your lungs to the master's coin purse, from the brush into your eyes. London exhales black, and you are the filter. In winter, the heat makes it worse. People burn more coal, stoke more fires, and smoke clogs the air, so thick you can taste it between buildings. The flues stay warm for hours after a fire's gone out, which means you crawl through ovens more often than not. The bricks burn your knees. Your palms blister if you touch too long. There's no point complaining. If you're lucky, you'll be told to wait 10 minutes. If you're not, you'll be told to climb faster before the next house gets impatient. You do what you're told, always, because a warm chimney is still better than no chimney at all. At least warm means you're working. Working means you're still valuable. Sometimes when you reach the top and drag yourself out onto a roof, you look across the skyline. Chimneys everywhere. Spires of black brick coughing grey into the air. You count them like gravestones. You wonder how many you've climbed, how many you still have left before your shoulders widen or your knees stop bending the right way. You don't know what comes next. You're not meant to. The city doesn't care what happens to you after you can no longer fit. You are not a citizen. You're part of the infrastructure. Temporary, replaceable. Every flue teaches you something. How to fold your shoulder around a bend. How to keep your mouth closed when soot rains down. How to suppress a cough until you're back outside. How to tell the difference between heat from a dying fire and heat from one that's still burning at the base. There's no guidebook, just pain, repetition, and the soft thud of a rod on your feet when you're too slow. Some days you think the houses know you're in there, that they feel your presence and tighten around you, like a muscle closing over a wound. You wonder how many chimneys have buried boys in silence, with no record but the faint smell of burnt skin. At the end of each climb, you're dirtier than when you started. The soot layers like sediment, thick in your ears, beneath your fingernails, inside the corners of your eyes. You stop trying to wipe it off. You stop expecting to see skin underneath. The flues leave their mark, and London doesn't let go. But the city isn't your only captor. The flues may try to crush you, but it's the man who sends you into them that truly breaks you. London is made of brick and soot. He's made of cold hands, hard eyes, and rules that shift depending on how much pain he wants you to feel that day. The buildings don't care if you live or die, but at least they don't pretend to. He's not your father, but he calls himself that when anyone official asks. I care for the boy, he'll say, tugging you forward with a filthy hand on your shoulder, like you're some reluctant prize pig he's proud of. Feed him, clothe him, give him honest work. And on paper, that's true. Technically, you have a roof. Technically, you are fed. Technically, what you do is considered work. But none of those words mean what people think they mean when it comes from his mouth. In reality, he doesn't care if you bleed. He doesn't care if you cry. He doesn't care if you can't breathe or if your knees won't bend anymore. He cares if the chimney gets cleaned. He cares if the customer pays. He cares if your small shaking body produces profit. You call him master, never by his name. You don't even know if he has a proper one. Something beyond what he barks at landlords or scribbles on ledgers. He speaks to you in orders, mostly, short, clipped, and edged with boredom or disdain. Up, out, faster, again. You learn his moods by the way his boots land on the floorboards. A slow thump means he's half drunk and forgetful. A quick, sharp rhythm means someone's getting beaten today, and you pray it isn't you. When he's in a good mood, he ignores you. When he's in a bad one, he doesn't. He says things like, spare the rod, spoil the child, just before he lifts the brush handle to strike. He doesn't shout often. He doesn't need to. His authority is built into the silence, into the way he looks at you when you hesitate, into the way his hand twitches near the belt when you cough too loud. If you fall behind, you get whipped. If you complain, you get whipped harder. If you bleed on a customer's carpet, he beats you in the alley so the homeowner doesn't have to see it. He thinks that's polite, efficient. You live in his cellar. You sleep there with the other boys, if there are other boys that week. Sometimes it's just you. Sometimes it's 3 or 4, curled up on mildewed rags and breathing in the damp rot of brick and stagnant air. There's no bedding, no fire, just a place out of the wind if you're lucky. And if you're not, there's always the ash pit out back, where the master dumps the chimney scrapings. It's dry at least and vaguely warm if the fires have been running. You learn to nest in it like a stray animal. You get used to the smell. Eventually, everything smells like ash anyway. Food comes in 2 forms, leftovers and punishment. On good days, you get crusts, scraps, things too bruised or stale to sell. On bad days, you don't eat at all. He says hunger builds character. He says boys grow too fast if you feed them too well. He says if you want more, you should work faster. And so you do. You race against your own appetite, not for reward, but for the absence of further pain. Sometimes you steal a half-bitten apple from a windowsill, a piece of bread from a distracted scullery maid. If you're caught, he makes you eat it off the floor, in front of the other boys while he lectures you about morality with a belt in his hand. Occasionally, he pretends to be kind. He'll pat your head with the same hand he uses to strike you. He'll tell you that you're doing well, that he might take you on as a proper apprentice one day, when you've proven yourself. You learn quickly that this is just noise, a way to keep you compliant. There is no future here. There is only continued usefulness, and the slow erosion of your body as you're worked down to the nub. If you get too large to climb, he'll sell you, or turn you out, or forget you entirely. Kindness is a delay, not a reprieve. You've seen what happens to boys who stop being useful. One day, they're there, coughing beside you in the flu queue. The next, they're gone. No explanation. Sometimes they're sent to the workhouse. Sometimes they vanish into the alleys, eyes wide and ribs showing. You ask the master where they went, and he shrugs. Didn't climb fast enough. That's the only epitaph most of you get. Not a name, not a burial, just a speed review. You might wonder what made him this way, whether he started cruel or learned it over time, but it doesn't matter. You're not here to psychoanalyze him. You're here to climb chimneys until your fingers split, until your legs stop responding, until your lungs sound like a broken kettle. His past is irrelevant. What matters is the brush in his hand, and the way he grips your collar when you flinch too slowly. Some boys convince themselves he cares. They mistake his silence for patience, his gruffness for fatherly pride. You don't. Not anymore. Maybe you did once, the first few days, when you thought this was temporary, when you thought if you were good enough, quiet enough, fast enough, he might treat you like a son. But sons don't sleep in ash. Sons don't get caned for sneezing. Sons don't climb flues in the dark, while their master eats hot stew in the kitchen above. You've learnt the truth now. He is not a father. He is not a mentor. He is a man with a quota and a collection of small soot-stained tools who happen to scream when you strike them. And you're one of those tools, nothing more. You belong to him the way a brush or a rod does, used when needed, discarded when worn down. But unlike a tool, you rot from the inside. He doesn't see that part. He doesn't hear the coughs late at night or see the blood on your pillow. He cares that your hands still climb, not that your lungs are crumbling. And even when the beatings stop, the soot doesn't. It stays. Long after the blows fade, it's still there, under your skin, in your mouth, in every breath you take. It never comes off. Not really. The soot lives inside you now. Not just on your skin, but beneath it. In the pores under your fingernails, between your teeth. It's crusted at the corners of your eyes when you wake. It's caked in your scalp, coating your hair like fine coal dust glued in place with sweat. You scratch your arms and black powder flakes off, sometimes mixed with dried blood. Your clothes carry it. Your bedding, if you have any, breathes it out with every shift of your body. Even when you try to scrub, which isn't often, it stays. Soap helps a little, but soap costs money, and the master doesn't waste coin on boys he sees as walking brushes. Baths are a luxury you hear about from windows. In fine houses you see tubs with copper fixtures and white porcelain bowls. But not for you. You wash when you wash in a bucket, cold, shallow and hurried. You dunk your face, maybe your hands, and the water turns grey before you've even started. The rest of you stays as it is. Soot-stained, fire-scented, hard around the edges. It clings to everything, even your voice. The rasp began after a few weeks of climbs. At first it was a tickle in the throat, then a cough that never left. Now it's just how you sound, like gravel being shoveled onto wet stone. Your sense of smell goes next, not all at once, but gradually, like a light dimming in the distance. At first you could still pick up the stink of burning coal, the sour reek of your own sweat. Then the stronger smells faded, food, rot, even the smoke. Everything blends now into one blanket scent. Fire, filth, and your own body. The one thing you can always recognise is blood. Yours or someone else's, it has the sharpness the soot can't quite mask. It catches at the back of your throat, right before you sneeze. And when you do, it's not snot that comes out. It's black mucus streaked with red. You stop noticing after a while. The master tells you that's normal. Some of the older boys call it the climb sickness, a kind of half-joke, half-truth. They say if you're coughing up soot, it means you're working hard. They say if your spit isn't black, you're slacking. But no one laughs when the wheezing gets worse. No one laughs when a boy hacks so hard he can't stand. You see it happen. First the cough, then the shaking, then the silence. He gets left behind the next morning, curled up in the corner of the cellar, breathing shallow like an animal waiting to die. No one talks about it. The master doesn't mention him. By the next week he's gone. Not even a name left behind. The soot gets in your joints too. You feel it when you stretch. Knees that grind, elbows that pop. You're not old, not by any normal measure, but your body's already betraying you. There's a tightness in your chest that never loosens, like something is growing there, something wrong. You wake up gasping sometimes, the dream still stuck in your throat, only to realise it wasn't a dream. Just your lungs reminding you they've had enough. You try to hide it. If the master hears you struggling, he'll say you're malingering. If you beg for rest, he'll hand you the brush and say, climb until you're better. You stop asking for anything. What's the point? You used to want to be clean, not just scrubbed, but clean in the way other children look. Faces like paper, hands like cream. That want fades fast. You see your reflection sometimes in puddles, and the boy looking back isn't someone you recognise. His skin is grey in places, shiny with dried sweat and coal. His eyes are rimmed in black. His lips cracked, his nose permanently red from soot burns. You stop looking after a while. You don't want to see the thing you've become. Even your breath carries it. The soot doesn't just live in your body, it leaves it too. You exhale, and it lingers in the air, invisible but present. You can see it in the way people recoil, not just from your smell, but from the weight of what clings to you. You try not to notice. You learn to be small, not just in size, but in presence, to make your steps quiet, your face blank, your coughs muffled. It's easier that way. People look past you when you're quiet. That's the goal. If they don't see you, they can't blame you or pity you. Some nights when your body won't stop itching and your lungs are full of dust, you wonder what's inside you now that wasn't there before. What else the flus have given you besides sores and scars? Something has changed. You feel it in your bones. A weight, maybe. A hollowness. Or both. You can't explain it, but it sits with you, thick and constant, like another layer of soot you'll never be able to wash away. The older you get, the deeper it settles. The soot becomes part of you. Skin, breath, blood. You think about it sometimes as you lie on your mat, staring at the ceiling in the dark. Your body humming with pain. What happens when you stop climbing? When your arms give out and your knees refuse? You already know the answer. You've seen it. You've smelled it. Soot doesn't just mark you. It replaces you. It fills in the gaps where your childhood used to be. It turns you from a boy into a smudge. You're not alone in this. Not that it makes things better, but it does make them stranger. All around you are other boys, small, soot-coloured, coughing, bruised. You live together in a kind of accidental fraternity, bonded not by choice but by filth, fatigue, and the shared understanding that none of you will make it out clean. You don't know where most of them came from. Some arrived one day with a black eye and a bag of tools. Others were already there when you started, older, faster, meaner. They rarely talk about the past and no one asks. You're all too busy surviving the present. Some boys are quiet. They've learned that silence invites fewer blows. Others are loud, constantly chattering to fill the empty space that the soot doesn't already claim. They talk about flues they've conquered, brushes they've broken, places they got stuck and nearly died, but always with a grin. It's not bragging exactly, more like sharing war stories. Every scar becomes a badge, every close call a punchline. I got stuck 3 bends deep in Covent Garden once, one boy says, pulling back his sleeve to show a knot of scar tissue on his forearm. Another laughs and lifts his shirt, revealing a row of burns across his ribs. You should have seen me after the chimney in Whitechapel. Thought my skin was going to come off with the soot. It would be funny if it weren't real, but it is real, and the stories keep coming. You start to pick up the slang, devil's elbow for a sharp flue bend, black kiss for the soot ring that forms around your lips when you breathe too hard in a hot chimney. You learn to speak in a shorthand of pain and bravado. It's a language of survival. If you can make someone laugh at your worst moment, it means you lived through it. And if you can't laugh, well, you stay quiet and hope no one notices. There's comfort in the company, even if it's cruel. You huddle together for warmth in the cellar, share crusts, pass around stories like smuggled contraband. Sometimes you even forget where you are, what you are. You almost feel like children again. Almost. But then someone starts coughing too hard, and the mood turns. You've learned to recognise that cough, the deep, chest-racking kind that doesn't stop. It's the sound of something going wrong, permanently. No one says anything when it happens. The group just goes still, waiting, listening. Then someone changes the subject, and the noise of chatter returns like nothing happened. Boys vanish all the time. One day they're beside you on the job, racing up a flue or mocking the master behind his back. The next, their bedroll is empty, their tools gone, and no one has the courage to ask where. You learn not to question it. Maybe they got too sick. Maybe they got too big. Maybe they fell and didn't get back up. Maybe they just ran. You tell yourself it's the last one, that they made it out, found something better. But deep down, you know the odds. No one escapes this by accident, and certainly not by getting lucky. New boys arrive just as fast. Sometimes they cry, sometimes they don't. The crying ones either stop quickly or disappear even faster. The quiet ones last longer. You try to help them, just a little. Show them how to brace their knees, how to wrap the brush without slicing their hands open. But you never get too attached. Not because you're cruel, but because you've learned the cost. Friends disappear. Bonds snap. It's easier to laugh at someone than to mourn them, and easier still to look away. Still, there are moments, small, strange moments, where something like humanity creeps through. You share a stale biscuit with the boy beside you, without being asked. You lend him your coat on a freezing morning and say nothing when it comes back torn. You hold a boy's hand as he wheezes through the night. Not because it'll help, but because no one should die with nothing to hold on to. These things happen in the cracks, quiet, unspoken, quickly forgotten, but they matter even if no one says so. You hear stories sometimes about boys who escaped. One climbed onto a delivery cart and rode it out of the city. Another snuck into a travelling show and became an acrobat. A third supposedly made it to the Navy, where at least the chimneys are horizontal. These stories pass around like bedtime tales, grim, unbelievable, and just hopeful enough to keep the idea of out alive. You don't believe them, not really. But when the flue is too hot and your lungs are raw and the master is yelling from the alley, you let yourself imagine, just for a second, that maybe you'll be the next one to vanish. Most days, though, you stay grounded, literally, in the muck, the soot, the half-light of basements and alleys. You hear the older boys talk about what comes next, how long you can climb before your back gives out, how fast you'll be replaced. They speak of it with the same calm they use to talk about lunch. You try not to think about it. You focus on today, on the next chimney, the next joke, the next small moment of something almost like friendship. Because in a world built to crush you, the only thing you have is each other. And if that means laughing at your own destruction, just to hear someone else laugh too, then that's what you do. You climb, you cough, you joke, you survive. You're told to check if the fire's been put out before you climb. You're told that, but no one ever actually waits. Time is money, and the master doesn't like delays. The homeowner says the hearth is cold, the servant gives a nod, and that's enough. You're sent in with a brush and a slap to the back, and by the time you feel the heat rising through the bricks, it's already too late. Some fires die slowly. They leave behind embers tucked in corners or trapped between bricks, glowing soft and deadly. You don't see them, you feel them. On your knees, your palms, the inside of your thighs, and you keep climbing, because turning back means punishment, and staying still means burning. Sometimes the chimney hasn't cooled at all. The fire wasn't extinguished, only tamped down. Or maybe the servant simply lied to speed things along. You learn to read the clues, the taste of the air, the way the smoke curls, the sound of heat shifting in the brick. But none of that matters if the master says go, so you go. And when it's too hot, you scream. Or you try to, but flues don't echo, they swallow sound. Your voice bounces against the walls and dies in the soot. If someone hears you, they might act. And if they act, they might toss in a bucket of water, or sand, or just let it burn itself out with you inside. The first time you hear about a boy being cooked alive, you think it's a story, a warning meant to keep you scared and sharp, but then it happens again, and again. You don't always see the bodies, you just hear about them. From the older boys, from other masters, speaking casually over a pint, from the quiet that falls in the cellar when a bedroll goes empty and stays that way. The details change, how long he was stuck, how hot the flue was, whether they tried to save him or just bricked it up and moved on. But the outcome never does. Even when the fires aren't burning, the chimneys can still kill. Some flues crumble with age. The bricks rot, the mortar fails, and suddenly the shaft you're climbing becomes a trap. A single brick shifts, and the weight above you gives way. It happens without warning. One moment you're inching upward, elbow by elbow. The next you're tumbling, slamming against brick and soot, your back catching on jagged corners as you fall. The impact comes all at once, a crack of bone, a burst of breath. Maybe you land in the hearth, maybe halfway, maybe not at all. The falls don't always kill, that's almost worse. Sometimes they leave you broken, arm twisted, ribs cracked, vision spinning. You lie there gasping while the master looms over you, inspecting the damage, not like a person checking on a child, but like a butcher assessing a side of meat. If you're still useful, you'll be given a few days to rest. If you're not, well, there's always another boy. The work doesn't stop just because one tool snaps. Other times, the flue itself betrays you with design. A bend too sharp, a shaft too narrow, you get stuck and the panic rises fast. Your chest won't move, your knees can't bend. You breathe in soot and can't cough it out. The master tries to coach you through it from below, sometimes with words, more often with strikes. If that fails, they send another boy up behind you to push. You're told to keep calm, to wriggle, to exhale, and shrink yourself just enough to pass. If you don't, you stay there until your body gives out, or someone finally decides to break the wall. The worst part is that everyone treats it like it's normal. Accidents happen, they say. Part of the job. No one builds memorials for climbing boys. No one holds funerals when a sweep dies in a chimney. At best, there's a whisper, a shake of the head, a new name added to the list of houses to avoid if you want to come out in one piece. Then the brush gets cleaned and another boy gets sent up. Sometimes that boy is you. You stop thinking of death as something distant. It's not a shadow waiting far down the road. It's crouched beside you, climbing alongside you, crawling just a breath behind in the flue. You learn to keep your movement steady, your breathing shallow, your limbs tight to your body. Every mistake has a cost. A misstep earns you a burn. A pause earns you a beating. A poor guess earns you a broken limb. Or worse, a grave no one will ever bother to dig. And yet, you climb, every day, every chimney. Not because you're brave, but because you've learned that there's no other way. You climb even when your burns haven't healed, even when your fingers are split, even when you watched someone fall the day before. The job doesn't pause for grief. The master doesn't factor trauma into the schedule. The soot doesn't care who it claims. By now, you've stopped flinching when you hear the stories. You've stopped reacting when you pass a chimney you know someone died in. You tell yourself it won't happen to you. And if it does, at least it will be quick. That's the best you can hope for. A quick mistake, a fast end. And maybe, if you're lucky, someone remembers your name for more than a week. You don't know what cancer is. None of the boys do. It's not a word anyone says in the cellar, and the master doesn't believe in illnesses he can't see with his own eyes. But it's waiting, quietly, like everything else that creeps into your body through the cracks. The soot you swallow, the dust you breathe, the burns that never quite heal. Each one is a slow, steady erosion. You think the danger is falling, or burning, but those are quick. What really waits for you is slower, meaner, the kind of thing that starts small and ends by eating parts of you, from the inside out. You first hear about it from an older sweep, a boy who somehow made it to 16 without growing too big. His voice is thick and low from years of flue dust, and when he sits, he does it carefully. He tells you the stories, the ones not meant for the new boys, about a pain that starts down low, where no one wants to admit it hurts. A swelling, a lump, a kind of rot. Boys too ashamed to say anything. Masters who ignore the complaints until it's too late. The word he uses is wasting. A wasting away of parts you didn't even know could be lost. You laugh at first, nervously. You think it's another horror story, one of those bits of chimney lore meant to scare you into silence. But then you notice how he winces when he walks, how he shifts uncomfortably when he sits too long, how he never climbs anymore, just cleans the tools and stares into the fire. That's when you stop laughing, and that's when it starts to stick in your head. The idea that even if you make it through the burns and the beatings, the soot will still find a way to kill you. Maybe not now, maybe not for years, but it's in there, working its way down, settling where it hurts the most. You won't hear the name for it, Chimney Sweeps carcinoma, until long after you've left this life behind, if you live that long at all. It will be the first industrial cancer ever recognised, a cruel badge of honour for children who never asked to be part of history. Doctors will write about it, Parliament will debate it, laws will eventually be passed, though not fast enough to help you or anyone you know. Your suffering will become statistics, your agony will be evidence. But not yet. For now, it's just pain you don't understand, ignored by men who think you're lying or lazy. The damage isn't just internal. Your joints swell, your spine curves. You stoop even when you're not climbing. Your knees pop with every movement. The falls and the scrapes take their toll. Infection sets in from wounds that never heal properly. Some boys walk with limps, others can't walk at all. You see them dragged along by others or propped against walls like broken tools no one's figured out how to throw away. They're still young, 12, 13, but they move like men 3 times their age, men who've already lost. And then there are the burns, not just the surface ones that scab and flake and eventually fade, the deeper ones, the kind that melt through skin and leave behind twisted scars. You've seen boys with hands that can no longer close properly, fingers bent from grabbing brick that was too hot. One lost an ear, another has a patch of scalp that never grew hair again. There's no money for doctors, no salves, no real recovery. You wrap a cloth around it, you keep climbing. If the master's feeling generous, he might give you a day to rest. But usually, he just tells you not to be soft. You know better than to hope for sympathy. Pain is expected, weakness is punished. You learn to lie about how much you're hurting, to keep quiet when the shaking starts, to hide the blood on your sheets. Because if you admit it, if you say out loud that something's wrong, there's a chance you'll be replaced, not healed, not helped, just discarded. Another boy will take your place, and your bed will be swept clean, like you were never there. Some nights you wonder what will finally do it. Will it be the cancer, the joints that stop bending, the lung that won't refill? You've seen boys cough until they pass out, choking on their own breath, others who wake up in the middle of the night, screaming from pain in their legs. The worst part isn't knowing that your body is failing. It's knowing that no one around you sees that as a tragedy. They see it as routine, as the cost of doing business. And even if you manage to avoid the worst of it, you'll never walk straight again. Your back will stay curved, your fingers will stay stiff, your breath will always rattle. People will know what you were by the way you move, the way you smell, the way your hands tremble when you reach for anything delicate. You won't be hired, you won't be welcomed, you'll be recognised and ignored at the same time, a ghost in soot-stained skin. This is the curse you carry, stitched into your lungs, smeared across your groin, twisted through your bones. The curse of the climbing boy, the slow, quiet death that waits at the end of all this pain. It doesn't come with fire or falling brick. It comes with a cough that never stops, and a pain you're too scared to name. Once a week, you're cleaned. That's the word they use, cleaned, as if you were a chamber pot or a chimney brush, not a living thing with skin that bleeds when scraped too hard. Washing day doesn't come with warm water or soft soap or anything you might associate with comfort. It comes with a slap to the back of the head, a barked command, and the sound of a bucket being filled in the yard. There's no privacy, no kindness, just a line of boys waiting their turn while the master or one of his hired hands prepares the brush. A real one, not for chimneys this time, but for your skin. You're stripped, not by choice, but by force. Your shirt comes off, and with it, some of the scabs and dry blood from the week's work. You wince, but no one cares. Pain is part of the process. You're told to stand still, to stop fidgeting, to be grateful. Then the brush comes out, rough bristles on a wooden handle, dipped into whatever cheap soap or lye solution the masters managed to scrounge. Sometimes it's just cold water and ash. Sometimes it's something worse. You're not allowed to look. You're just supposed to hold your breath and endure. The scrubbing starts at the back usually. That's where most of the damage is, scars, scabs, layers of soot embedded in the folds of your skin. The brush digs in like it's being used to sand wood. You grit your teeth. You try not to scream. If you flinch too much, you're hit. If you bleed, they wipe it away with a rag and keep going. The goal isn't hygiene, it's control. It's about proving that even the filth you carry in your skin can be beaten out of you if someone pushes hard enough. They scrub your arms, your legs, your chest. Behind the ears, between your fingers. Nothing is too small, too raw, or too private to be scraped. You learn early to go limp, to stop reacting. It's easier if you don't think of your body as yours. Just a thing. Just another tool that gets cleaned when it's too dirty to function. The younger boys cry. The older ones stare straight ahead, jaws clenched, eyes glassy. You wonder which is better, sobbing and being punished for it, or going numb and forgetting how to feel anything at all. Then comes the part you dread most. The master, or sometimes one of his older helpers, begins picking at the scabs, not gently, not with care, with fingernails or a rag, yanking loose the hardened black patches of skin where the soot has mixed with blood. Some of them bleed again, some tear deeper than before. It's not about healing, it's about visibility. He doesn't like when you look too rough for the clients. He says it makes them nervous, so he peels off the worst of it, like he's stripping old paint off a wall, then spits on a rag and wipes away the smear. If you're lucky, the cleaning ends there. You're tossed a rough cloth and told to dry off. If you're not lucky, and you usually aren't, you're dunked in the trough. It's a wooden tub set in the yard, filled with water so cold it burns. There's always a layer of soot floating on the surface from the boys who went before you. Bits of old soap, dead skin, scum. The water hasn't been changed in days. You hold your breath and go under, because if you don't, someone pushes your head down until you do. When you come up, your teeth chatter so hard you're afraid they'll crack. Your skin is on fire from the cold and the scrubbing. You want to curl into yourself, to find a blanket or at least a dry corner of the yard, but there's no time. You're handed your clothes, still damp, still filthy, and told to dress. The wind cuts through your wet skin like a knife. Your fingers won't bend properly. Your back feels like it's been peeled, but you pull your shirt on anyway. If you move too slowly, you'll be hit. If you complain, you'll be made to start over. No one talks much on washing day, not after. You sit in the cellar, huddled against the cold, your skin raw and stinging. The older boys inspect the damage on their arms, compare missing patches of hair or new scrapes. One of them jokes that he's cleaner now than he's ever been, and that maybe he should go knock on the door of a rich man's house and ask for a job as a valet. The others laugh, thin and humourless. It's not funny really, but it passes the time while you wait for your body to stop shaking. You wonder if the washing is supposed to make you feel human again. If, in some twisted way, it's meant to be a kindness, but it doesn't. It makes you feel small, smaller than you already are. It reminds you that nothing you own, not even your skin, is truly yours. It belongs to the work, to the soot, to the man who decides how clean you're allowed to be. By morning the grime will return. The flues don't wait for clean skin, and neither does the master. Whatever softness the washing might have pretended to offer is gone by the first climb. You'll sweat, you'll bleed, you'll cough soot back into the air, and by next week you'll be just as black as before. Maybe blacker. That's the point really. Washing day doesn't keep you clean. It just reminds you how dirty you are. They say it's progress. That the invention of the chimney brush was a leap forward. Long rods, flexible bristles, mechanical ingenuity brought to bear on a sooty problem. No more boys, they promised. No more scrapes and burns and broken limbs. Just a clean chimney, efficiently swept by a modern tool wielded from the hearth. On posters and in Parliament, it was all celebration. Clean technology. Humane alternatives. The death of the climbing boy. But out in the alleys, behind the houses where soot piled up like snowdrifts, and landlords shouted about clogged flues, things looked very much the same. Yes, the brush exists. Yes, it's long and bristled and shiny enough to impress a gentleman at a demonstration. But the city's chimneys don't match the diagrams. They twist and narrow, curve in impossible places, drop suddenly into side channels, too tight for a rod to reach. The brush gets stuck, or it skips the corners, or it shoves the soot deeper in instead of dragging it out. And the clients, well, they still want their chimneys spotless. So the master brings you along just in case. You don't carry the brush at first. That's for the older boys, or the master himself, if he's feeling energetic. You carry the sack of rods, the bundled wires, the replacement heads. You help screw the segments together, hold them steady while they're fed up the flue, and then you wait. Sometimes the brush does its job. The soot rains down in clumps, the air fills with black fog, and you're told to pack it all up and move on. But more often, something goes wrong. A bend proves too tight. The bristles catch on a crack. The rod won't turn past a join. The brush is stuck, and the master starts to swear. That's when he looks at you, not with malice, just expectation. Up you go, he says, as if it's a matter of course. The brush might be the future, but you're still the backup plan, still the solution when progress falters. You're sent in to push from the inside, to climb past the jam, to free the modern tool that was supposed to replace you. You wedge yourself into the shaft alongside the rod, your body contorted around the thing, meant to make you obsolete. It's heavier than you expect, harder to maneuver around. The metal is cold, and it scrapes your arms as you pass. You try not to bleed on it. The bristles are sharp. You've been through these flues before, but never with this much in the way. The brush takes up space you used to have. Your elbows catch, your knees lock. You twist to get around a segment and realise the only way through is to breathe out and slide your chest over a jagged bit of brick. You do it. You always do it, because the alternative is being pulled out and whipped for wasting time. You reach the stuck brush, plant your feet, and shove. Sometimes that's enough, sometimes not. When it doesn't move, you're told to climb higher and pull from the top. When the soot finally comes loose, it does so all at once, a choking, blinding storm of grit and dust that fills your mouth before you can close it, fills your ears before you can plug them. It rushes downward with the weight of everything that's been building up for years. You cough so hard your ribs ache, your eyes water, your hands slip. You hold your position until the rain stops, then climb back down through the same black tunnel, trying not to vomit as the loosened soot clings to your tongue. Back on the ground, the master nods. Maybe he tosses you a crust, maybe he says nothing at all. The client's happy, the chimney's clean, the brush is saved. You are, once again, a tool used to rescue the tool that was invented to replace you. That's how it goes now. The brush gets the credit, the boy gets the bruises, and the newspapers keep printing stories about how no children climb chimneys anymore. They call it a compromise, a better way, a brush for the straight flues, a boy for the bends. You're not sure what's better about it. The bruises are the same, the burns the same, the choking soot's the same. The only difference is that now, when people ask whether children still sweep chimneys, they can be told, in all technical honesty, not usually. The brush has become a shield for the lie, a symbol of progress that never reached the places it was needed most. You dream sometimes of being replaced for real, of machines that can crawl through the chimneys without needing skin, without needing lungs. You picture them, metal arms, gear-driven joints, a whirring heart that doesn't bleed when it slips. But they don't exist, not yet. And even when they do, they'll still break. And someone will still have to fix them. Someone small, someone cheap. Until then, you carry the rods, you carry the brushes, you climb when they don't work. You scrape your knees alongside the march of invention. And if you vanish in a flue trying to free the very tool meant to save you, well, that's progress for you. There's no celebration when you outgrow the job. No cake, no handshake, no fond farewell. Just a moment, somewhere between one climb and the next, when you try to squeeze into a flue you've cleaned a dozen times before and find that your shoulders no longer turn the way they used to. The space that once gave just enough now won't give at all. Your knees press against brick. Your elbows scrape raw. You push, you twist, you hold your breath, but you don't fit, and you won't again. You climb back down and look at the master. Maybe he shrugs, maybe he curses, maybe he doesn't say anything at all. Just walks away, already thinking about which smaller boy he can put in your place. He's been watching after all. He saw it coming. You were getting slower, breathing heavier, taking longer to recover between chimneys. He doesn't need a boy who pauses mid-climb or takes up more room than the soot. He needs something small, quick, cheap. You're none of those anymore. You're not proud of having survived. Survival wasn't a victory. It was just delay. Every year added more damage. Your back curves now, permanently. Your fingers don't straighten right. You cough black every morning and taste blood most nights. Your hearing's gone soft in one ear, and your knees grind when you walk. You've spent most of your life crawling through the infrastructure of a city that never once looked down to notice you. And now that you've grown too large to fit in the cracks, you find there's no space for you on the surface either. You're not trained for anything else. You never learnt to read. You don't know your letters or your sums. No clerk will hire you. No tradesman will take you on. You're not strong enough for proper labour and too visibly broken for polite work. Your voice rasps, your hands tremble, and your skin smells faintly of soot no matter how many times you wash. People wrinkle their noses when you pass. They cross the street or pretend not to hear when you ask about work. You can't blame them. You wouldn't hire you either. So what do? Some boys turn to crime, not out of malice, but because it's the only thing left that pays. They steal food, pick pockets, run errands for men who don't ask questions. You hear about one who started robbing houses through the same chimneys he once cleaned. Got caught, sent to the hulks, or maybe transported. You never saw him again. Others drift into drink. Gin's cheap, and it burns in a way that distracts from the ache in your bones. You see them slumped in alleys or curled under carts, muttering half-coherent stories about flues and fire and boys who never came back down. And then there are the ones who just stop. They find a place, quiet, out of the way, and lie down. Maybe in a doorway, maybe in a corner of the workhouse yard, maybe in the ash pit where they used to sleep when they were small. They stop asking for food, stop moving, stop waking. The master doesn't look for them. No one does. They vanish like chimney smoke, one gust and they're gone. You think about those boys more than you mean to. You wonder which path you'll take. You're not clever enough to con your way into a better life, not strong enough to carry coal or haul carts, not desperate enough yet for crime. You try odd jobs, sweeping real floors, emptying ash buckets, carrying coal upstairs, but the pay's worse and the pain's the same. You're still breathing soot, still bent over, still invisible. Sometimes you see the new boys, smaller, younger, cleaner-faced for now. You watch them shuffle down the street with their brushes and their sacks, and you want to warn them, to say something. But what would you say? That it doesn't end well? That if they're lucky, they'll end up just like you, broken, hungry, half forgotten? They wouldn't believe you anyway. Children never do. You didn't. There are moments, brief, flickering moments, where you think about leaving, about walking until the city runs out, finding work on a farm, or joining the navy, or changing your name and pretending to be someone else. But your legs hurt and the road's long, and you've heard stories about what happens to boys like you out in the countryside. So you stay. The city that chewed you up is still the only one that knows your name, even if it never cared to say it. You're not old, not by any real measure, but you feel it. The way your bones resist the cold, the way your chest tightens when you climb stairs. You see yourself in the eyes of the children in the street, wary, disgusted, afraid. You've become a ghost that walks in daylight, a shadow that smells of ash. You're not a climbing boy anymore. You're just what's left when a climbing boy grows too big to be useful. And in a world built on soot and silence, that's the same as being nothing. Eventually, someone notices. Not because of you, of course. Not because of the hundreds, maybe thousands, of boys who came before, sleeping in ash pits and coughing up soot in the dark. No, it takes something more theatrical, a tragedy in the right location, involving the right child, witnessed by the right kind of people. Maybe it's the boy who died in the flue of a government building. Maybe it's the one who burned to death in a bishop's chimney while guests were arriving for Sunday dinner. His screams interrupt the service, and suddenly morality has a microphone. The newspapers pick it up first. They write about the poor lad, the unfortunate youth, the harrowing sight of his charred body being dragged from the hearth. They don't mention his name. They rarely do, but they describe the scene in just enough detail to provoke outrage without responsibility. Readers are horrified, which is to say, they are entertained. They write letters to the editor. Some even donate to funds for the boy's family, if he had one. But they do not ask who sent him up the chimney, or why he was still climbing years after the laws supposedly stopped that sort of thing. Then come the reformers, clergy, doctors, gentlewomen with strong opinions and fragile sensibilities. They hold meetings, they publish pamphlets, they stage moral demonstrations with banners and leaflets and speeches about the rights of children. They call it a scandal, a stain on the conscience of the empire. They use phrases like national shame and unchristian cruelty. Some of them even mean it. They stand outside Parliament and demand better laws, better inspections, actual enforcement. They speak with passion, and in some cases, tears. You hear about it secondhand. Someone reads a headline aloud, or a client mutters something while lighting a fire. The master grumbles that the papers should mind their own business. He says it's all for show. He's not wrong. By the time the outrage reaches the people, it's meant to help. The worst of the damage has already been done. You've already lost your childhood, your lungs, your strength. The thing they're trying to stop is already inside you, decades too late to cure. The laws tighten again. This time, there are real penalties, real inspectors. Masters begin to look over their shoulders, to hide the younger boys, or stop using them altogether. You hear stories of arrests, of sweeps fined or jailed for forcing children into flues. Some boys are sent to charities instead of cellars. The newspapers declare victory. Parliament pats itself on the back. The activists go home. Their work done. Their consciences soothed. But by then, you've already been replaced or discarded. They call it progress. You call it timing. Funny how people only act when the suffering becomes inconvenient to ignore. For decades, children choked in chimneys. Their fingers bled. Their bones broke. No one marched then. No one wept. But let it happen in a home with velvet curtains and imported wallpaper, and suddenly the nation can't sleep until something is done. You try to feel something about it, relief maybe, or gratitude. But it's hard to be thankful for a rescue that didn't come for you. Hard to applaud the closing of a door that's already crushed you on the way through. You pass by boys who'll never climb a chimney in their lives, and you wonder what that must be like. To be too young and yet too free to ever know what it is to fear brick walls pressing in on all sides. They walk differently, those boys, like their bodies belong to them. Sometimes you imagine what your life would have been if that law had come sooner, if someone had noticed the black beneath your fingernails, or the rasp in your throat, or the way your spine bends even when you try to stand straight. You picture a version of yourself sitting at a desk, learning to write. A version who grows tall instead of twisted, who runs instead of coughs. But that version never existed. That boy was never given a chance. You were born into the gap between laws, and in that gap, you were crushed. You hear one day that there's a monument going up, a statue to commemorate the climbing boys. It's meant to honour your sacrifice, to remember the price paid by children in soot and blood. You think about visiting it just to see. But what would be the point? A plaque with kind words doesn't make your back stop hurting. Bronze doesn't replace lungs. You don't want to be remembered. You want to have been seen when it mattered. The city moves on. People light their fires. The new rods sweep clean without screams. And you, what's left of you, keep walking. Or limping. Or sitting still for longer than you used to. You've become part of the architecture now, as forgotten as the soot that still settles behind old walls. The public outcry passed over you like rain on stone. Brief, loud, and already evaporated. You don't die in a blaze of glory. There's no heroic last climb. No dramatic fall to be whispered about in alleys for years to come. You die the way you lived. Quietly, invisibly, and covered in soot. Maybe it's the cancer. The kind that started in your groin and spread like fire through your insides. So slowly and painfully, you couldn't even cry near the end. Or maybe it's the cold, the kind that creeps into the cracks of your joints and doesn't let go. Perhaps it's the fall, the one climb too many, where your fingers gave out, and the bricks didn't catch you. Or maybe it's just hunger, dull, steady, merciless. No one writes it down. No one investigates. You're not discovered by a weeping parent or a kindly stranger. You're found by a landlord, angry that his flue still smells of something foul, or by a servant trying to stoke the morning fire who realises there's no draught. Someone eventually pulls you out, or part of you. A master shrugs. A street cleaner sweeps the mess away. You're buried in a pauper's grave, if you're lucky, in a pit with a dozen others, if you're not. No name, no marker, no mourners, just a blank rectangle of dirt in a part of the city where people don't walk unless they have to. The master doesn't mention you again. If he remembers you at all, it's as a tool that wore out a bit too soon. Your name is passed on to the next boy, maybe. Or not. You weren't the first and you weren't special. He's already training another one, smaller, quieter, with hands like yours used to be before the burns. That boy will sleep in the same corner, use the same tools, climb the same chimneys that killed you, and he won't ask what happened to the last boy. He knows better. No one records the date of your death. There are no legal proceedings, no headlines, no talk of justice. You are not a scandal. You are not a lesson. You are just gone. The city moves around you like a tide around a stone, slow, indifferent, inevitable. Somewhere, someone is passing a law a few decades too late. Somewhere, a gentleman is polishing the brass on a chimney brush and congratulating himself on the march of progress. Somewhere, a woman reads about chimney sweeps in a pamphlet and sighs, her tea growing cold. Maybe you're remembered for a moment by one of the boys you slept beside, the one who used to share his crust of bread when the master wasn't looking. He might think of you years later when his own lungs start to rattle, when the coughing doesn't stop. But even that memory fades. Time sands down even the sharpest edges. After all, there are so many of you. Too many to remember. Too many to mourn. The city still burns coal, the chimneys still stand, and the soot still settles, on bricks, on windowsills, on skin. But not yours anymore. Your skin is underground now, or lost, or burned away. What remains of you is dust, and not even the useful kind. If someone were to find your bones, years from now, centuries even, they'd be brittle, pitted, bent in unnatural ways. They'd find damage to your spine, your knees, your ribs. Evidence of a life spent twisted in impossible positions. They might think you were malformed, diseased. They wouldn't understand that this was what happened when you spent your short life inside walls. When the world pressed in on you from every direction and never let up. They might not even believe you were a child. Children aren't supposed to look like that. Children are supposed to grow straight, laugh easily, die later, not like this. But you did, and you weren't alone. The graveyards are full of you. Not that anyone can tell. Your names are lost to damp ledgers and forgotten parish records. Your stories, if they were ever told, were reduced to cautionary tales or moral lessons printed in columns between advertisements for soap and spectacles. You became the faceless example, the nameless victim, a symbol. Easier that way. No one has to think about what your voice sounded like, whether you had a favourite place to sleep, whether you were scared at the end. There's no monument, no statue of a boy holding a brush, mouth stained black, eyes too old for his face, no plaque that says he died cleaning your chimney. At best, there's a footnote in a history book, a line about child labour, a mention of legislation that came just a little too late. Maybe a tourist will pass by an old flue someday and wonder how anyone could have fit inside. They won't think long. There's always something more cheerful just around the corner. And that's it. That's all. You don't become a legend. You don't become a martyr. You become soot. That brings us to the end of tonight's story. If you're still awake, thank you for bearing witness, softly, silently, to a life that scraped through brick and bone and left behind nothing but soot. Not every history leaves a name. Some leave scars, some leave silence, but all of them, even the smallest and dirtiest, stacked the chimneys and lit the fires that warmed a nation too comfortable to look down. If you'd like early access to more of these quiet, bitter truths, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find a link to the Patreon in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with the next forgotten life you'd like us to walk through together. And if you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps others find their way to these stories. Sleep well.